What is going on, guys? It is Ghost Green here, and today I'm coming at you with another tutorial. Finally, I'm making another editing tutorial, and this one is going to be on color correction. I'm going to show you literally how I color correct everything. Like, all of my Fortnite edits are color corrected very similarly. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to show you how I like all the stuff that I do outside of this main composition, and then I might even throw in like my render settings and stuff like that too, just to get edits looking as perfect as they can be. So first off, I'm going to play a little clip of what the edit looks like now when it's raw with nothing, like no RSMB, no color correction, nothing like that. And then at the end, I'll show you guys what it looks like with the color correction. Okay, so I hope that's what it looks like now. That's raw. There's no cinematic here. It's two clips, one in the nighttime and one in the daytime. And now we're gonna switch over and show you guys how I color correct my footage. So the first thing that I do once I edit a couple clips in an edit is I press Control A, and that pops up and selects every single thing in this composition. Now I right click, go to Pre-Compose, and I type raw. I usually just call it raw. You can call it whatever you want, but that's what I've always done. I get rid of these keyframes here, and then the first thing I do is I have an RSMB and shake preset that I usually use. I'll just drag that on there, and that just adds RSMB, which is like a motion blur, and Sapphire Shake, which is just like a little bit of screen shake. I don't know, I like it, but you don't have to do that if you don't want to. And yeah, that's basically all I do. All the settings for that are right here. You can see 0.5 blur amount, the motion sensitivity is set at 100. For the shake, the amplitude is 0.15 and the frequency is 1.5. So that's just basically what I do on every single edit. Nothing too special there. Now the next thing that I do is I go over here and I press Control Alt Y to make a custom adjustment layer. I just title it CC, and then I duplicate it because I usually have 2 layers of color correction on my edits. So that's pretty simple. Next thing I do is Control Y, and that pops up this little thing to make a black solid. So depending on the size of your composition, you can see that by pressing Control K, and it'll bring up the composition size. If it's 1080p, this is usually what it's going to be like. If it's not 1080p, if it's like 720p, then it would be 1280 by 720. But mine's 1080p because my clips are 1080p. So then I make a solid that's the exact same size. As you can see, it's the same size as my composition. And then what I do is I add CC Jaws. So type that in, CC Jaws, it's default in After Effects. Drag that onto your solid, and you turn up the completion a little bit. You can see there's like a, I think for height, you just turn that down to 0, and now you can see as my completion gets up, this is what I use this is what I use for my black bars. So what I usually do is I go to the beginning of my first clip, so just open up your raw composition, find where your clip starts, go here, you can see that's the first frame that actually shows the clip. Any frame before it is black. So just go to this first frame, come here, and I stamp this at 100%, so there's no black bars whatsoever. I don't use black bars on my clips, I only use it on cinematics and stuff. And then I go like 4 frames before that, so you can use page up or page down, or you can use these buttons here to go previous frame, next frame. I use page up, page down on the keyboard. Doesn't really matter, whatever you want to do. And then you're gonna press U to pull up the completion keyframe thing, and I'll just make a keyframe for 76. So if you look, 76 is these pretty thick black bars. That's what I use for cinematics. And since before the first clip there's gonna be cinematics, I just go 1, 2, 3, 4 frames before, drag that over, and that's where, if I turn this off, you'd see this is where a cinematic would go, and there's these nice big black bars. But that doesn't really matter. That's just what I like to do before I make my color correction, just so it looks good. So now I'll turn that off, go back to our clip, and we can start making a color correction. So there's 2 main things that I put on my bottom layer. I like to use sharpen here, and I turn that up to like 20 maybe. That's probably a good amount. You can't see it did here. I'll go to just kind of sharpens up the edges and makes stuff look better. You can see just the small edges get a little sharper. It looks a little nice, but that's far from the end. Next thing I do is I go and add curves. So what curves does is it just gives it a little bit of contrast. So I usually just do like a little S curve. I put a dot here, a dot here, I drag this one down a little bit, and then this one up a little bit. And that's literally all I do. You can see this gives it a little bit of contrast. There's a few ways you can do this. You could do it with like levels. You could do it with literally like the brightness and contrast effect. I just like to use curves. I don't know, that's just me. Yeah, and sometimes like if you want it to be a little bit more extreme, you can pull this out more. That's probably a bit too much. But yeah, that's what I tend to do. So I'll just leave something like that. Let me just save it real quick. And then the next thing I do is I go to this layer. I have a preset that I usually add. I'll show you. I use this preset. So I just delete this film glow and this other thing. That's like an old COD color correction I used to use. And I have this magic bullet look. So I'll get into the settings real quick. Basically, it's just really simple stuff. Literally like saturation, just a little bit of saturation, curves, a bit more of a precise S curve, but it's still really similar to what I already had. Warm, cool. There's literally like nothing with this. And then Colorista 3-way. I don't really have anything. There's a little bit of maybe like a purple shadow, but other than that, nothing. And a little bit of saturation over here as well. Or I guess desaturation. Anyway, so that is literally what I do. And this, in and of itself, is like a pretty decent color correction. I don't have any like big complaints about this. It works, you know? It's a pretty clean color correction. I don't like to do too much when I'm doing Fortnite stuff, as opposed to maybe in COD. You'd see I have like a lot of people would use these big, poofy, like colorful color corrections. I like something plain like this. It looks totally fine in the daytime, as you can see. And if we go back over to my other clip in the nighttime, you can see it makes it a little darker, but it just makes everything kind of pop nicely, and I kind of fuck with it. So another thing that you can do is you can do a little bit of glow, and you guys have seen that in like my edits in the past. Maybe I'll throw something on the screen right here. Anyway, so something like that. You can see I have like glow and there's some colored flashes, so I'm gonna get into that a little bit, not too much. So what I end up doing is I go and I find BCC film glow, drag that onto your second layer right below the looks, and you can see it looks pretty terrible right now. So the first thing we're gonna do is go to like 400 for the glow intensity, and it's gonna get really bright. And then you go down to the radius, and I set it to like 150. Let's go 131 actually, I don't know. Just a random number. Something pretty high, and you can see it's really bright. Now the next thing you're gonna do is turn your threshold all the way up to like 90. So now you can see it's back to normal pretty much, but there's a little bit of like a glow. Like you can see the glow, but it doesn't look very good. So what I tend to do next is I pick like a color. So I think this is a song by The Weeknd and Travis Scott. I think it would look kind of nice with like a little pink purple-ish color correction to it. And that would also look good with like the night sky. So I'm just going to pick a color something similar to this. You can see, and it really didn't change much because we're at a 90 threshold. So that's a bit much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this down to maybe 85. We'll see. And there's a bit, you can see a bit of an impact there. But the big thing is going to be like having the beat, they're more having the color flash with the beat. So if you go over here in my clip, you can see if I press U, it'll pop up, and I have these keyframes for levels. So basically what I do is I'll put a keyframe on every beat. You can see all the beats have keyframes on them. So when it's like a bright flash, you can see I have it set to like a normal amount, and then I have it set to 200. So if you guys want more like of an in-depth thing on how I do these levels keyframes, I'll put a card on the screen right now in the top right. You can see I have a more in-depth tutorial literally on these colored flashes. But basically I have like a white flash, and what that does is it gives this glow more of like a bright. You can see the glow is a lot more noticeable on this keyframe. If I like, you can see that's what it looks like when it's off, that's what it looks like when it's on. And if I go back a keyframe, you don't notice it nearly as much. So it's like just kind of like a colored flash. And you obviously want to fine tune this, like maybe turn your threshold up a bit more. You could turn it back up towards like 87, something like that. It's a little less prominent. And there's a few other things that I tend to do sometimes, like maybe I'll have it different for a certain clip. If one clip is like really white and really bright, I'll turn the color threshold, or the glow threshold rather, I'll turn that up to like 95 or something, and it's a lot less prominent. But yeah, that's basically it. That's what I do to make that cool colored glow flashing type thing. I'll leave this at like 90, so it's pretty high. It won't be too big of an impact. and I'll let you guys see what the final thing looks like. But last but not least, I want to show you guys how I render stuff. So I use Adobe Media Encoder to render. I know that's a little bit different than most of you guys who use After Effects. You probably just render it straight out of After Effects. But if you use CC 2014 like I do, then you don't have the option to render in H.264, which is like a QuickTime video, like a .mp4 rendering or encoding. So what I do is I go to Composition, add to Adobe Media Encoder, include. You have to get Adobe Media Encoder, and you want to make sure that the year of After Effects you're using, you have the same year of Media Encoder. So I have 2014 for both of them, and then I pop it up right here, and just give it a second. It'll load the clips you want to render into this little section. So let's just let that happen real quick. So this is where I rendered it out to. You want to set your output location. I just have a folder called Ready to Go. That's where I render all my stuff to. And then I have a preset, but I'll go in to break down that preset basically. The first part is you want to set it to H.264. Like I said, that is like .mp4 formatting. That way you don't have to render it out and then compress it to make it a smaller file. It'll just immediately come as that MP4 file that isn't too big of a file size. I don't know why this is taking so long. Dynamic link is terrible. Anyway, so in my preset, this is basically where the actual important part is. So for frame rate, I usually set it to 29.97 or 30. 30 is fine. Like, they're basically the same thing. It doesn't make a difference. You want to render it in your full resolution, so 1920 by 1080, because mine is at 1080p composition. And then this is the really important part. What you want to render it is you want to go to the bitrate settings. You want to use a constant bitrate, and then you want to target your bitrate somewhere high, like 50 to 60 megabits per second. It depends on the clips. The way I record is I record at 50 megabit per second. That's the highest bitrate that you can possibly record at with Shadowplay in 1080p. So that is how I do it. Just to keep the maximum quality possible. I'm sure some of you guys, if you record in like 4K or something, maybe you can get a higher bitrate than that. But 50, 60 is pretty high, and that's probably the best you're going to be able to get. So I just do that. I click OK, and then I press play and render it all out. I'll show you guys what the final version looks like with the color correction and the colored flashes and everything all together looks like. I also added some gun sounds and stuff like that, just, I don't know, to make it better. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Shout out to my man Hayden for editing this for me. I know it's kind of weird, an editor doesn't edit his own videos, but I'm kind of lazy and didn't have time to edit this, so I hired my man to do it. Check him out down below, he's awesome. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Leave a comment with what you want me to cover next, and then the most upvoted comment, I will make sure to do that in the near future. So I appreciate you guys showing so much love on all my edits recently. Love you guys so much. Thank you. Peace out, guys.